Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Muslim Philanthropy and Active Faith. For those of you who are returning Foundation Center webinar participants, a warm welcome back. And to those of you here for the first time, we're very glad that you're joining us today. We see that a couple of you answered our earlier question about where you are joining us from. And we actually got a couple of interesting responses. We have a couple folks that are actually joining us from Turkey. So welcome and thank you so much for being with us today from wherever you are. So as I mentioned earlier, my name is Julieta Mendez. I am the Director of Programs here at Foundation Center. And along with my colleague, Elizabeth Zavada, who's a Program Associate, we're going to be your hosts for today. And we will be supporting the webinar by managing polls as well as collecting questions that you ask along the way and posing them during the Q&A at the end of today's presentation. So now I want to introduce our presenters, Safa Ibrahim and Muhi Khwaja. And I'm going to turn the controls over to them so they can display their presentation as they take the reins. So Safa Ibrahim is a co-founder and vice president for the board of directors with the American Muslim Fund. Safa is a nonprofit institutional development leader. In the last 2 decades, she has held a wide range of roles that span from board president to programs director. Safa is passionate about bringing together diverse resources to mobilize a community and to expand the capacity of nonprofits to deliver service and value. Accompanying her is Muhi Khwaja, who's a co-founder of the American Muslim Fund. He currently works as a senior philanthropy officer at the American Red Cross. Most recently, in 2016, he became a certified fundraising executive through the Association of Fundraising Professionals and earned his certificate in fundraising management in 2017 from Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy. Additionally, we would like to also thank the Borealis Philanthropy for their generous support to our All Together Now Conversations in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion webinar series. This is the fourth webinar in the series, and you can explore our previous offerings in the series on grantspace.org, our website. And without further ado, I'll now turn it over to Muhi and Safa. Welcome, both of you.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much for having us. It's a real honor and privilege to chat with all of you. So we're really excited for you to be able to position your charity to be more diverse and take a lead in promoting cross-cultural and interreligious avenues to enhance your outreach. Many of us already know that the word philanthropy in Latin means love to mankind. And in Muslim philanthropy, we really feel that this is our way to as an act of faith, give back to the community and make the world a better place. So when we outlined the objectives of this presentation, we wanted to make sure that you understood the philanthropic traditions in Islam, and we wanted you to be able to have cross-cultural outreach within your organization and position your organization's mission to align with the Muslim community as well. And what we really want to walk away with is a checklist and plan of action for you to engage your local Muslim community. So one of the poll questions that we had to engage you was to see what motivated you to join today's conversation. And if you look at your screen, you should see that the poll is open. So we'll take a moment to look at the options and we'll report back soon.
Thank you, Muhi. Yes, so we do have our first polling question. Again, what motivated you to join today's conversation? The responses that are available are, I work with the Muslim community, I fund the Muslim community, I am a member of the Muslim community, or other. And for the other, you can specify, again, in the chat box of GoToWebinar. Let me see, let me close the poll here and share the results. So Muhi, what we have here is about 45% say I work with the Muslim community, 39% specified other, and some of the responses that we got from others is that they are interested in learning more of how we as an organization can engage with others outside of our community, which includes the Muslim community. A couple of other responses were, I am a member of the Muslim community and work with the community, interested in receiving funding from Muslim funders and foundations, and I have a different, I've lived in different Muslim countries, and I'm interested in engaging the Muslim community in the U.S. with my nonprofit, which serves several Muslim countries. What do you think about the results?
So it's interesting to see this. It's wonderful to see that there are so many people working with the Muslim community. And it's good to see that there are members of the Muslim community engaging with us today. It would be nice to see that there's more cross-cultural funding happening between various communities to the Muslim community and vice versa. But let's take that and talk about what is basically the foundation of the basic teachings of Islam. The tenets of Islam are really 5 pillars. It's the testimony that there's only one God and that Muhammad, peace be upon him, is the messenger of God, and the messengers prior to him are the messengers of God. It is the 5 daily prayers. It is almsgiving. It is fasting, especially during the prescribed month of Ramadan, which is the 9th month of the lunar calendar. And if possible and if capable, conducting the once in a lifetime pilgrimage to Mecca. Muslim tradition basically focuses on the obligation of almsgiving, of giving charity. It is seen as an obligation to our faith. It is seen as part of our the practice of mainly being on the righteous path, and attaining that righteousness is basically through the act of giving. One verse from the Quran in chapter 3, verse 82 says, "They will not attain righteousness till they spend in charity of the things they love." Islam philanthropy is basically practiced mainly through the institution of sadaqah. Sadaqah is an Arabic word that means voluntary giving. The second is waqf, a religious foundation, endowment, or trust. And the third is zakah, which literally means almsgiving. Zakat is, as I mentioned, the obligation of every Muslim to give of their wealth, and that is prescribed as to be 2.5% of their cumulative wealth, and it is given annually. Typically, Muslims will give of that during the month of Ramadan, again, during the 9th lunar month of the year.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the overview of Islam. Some of the things that we wanted to highlight were Islam in America started well back in the 1700s, and there were the first country to recognize the United States of America as a sovereign nation from Britain was the Muslim country of Morocco. A letter was sent congratulating the country from Sultan Muhammad III in 1777. The gentleman pictured on the left is Umar ibn Said, and he was brought to Charleston, South Carolina as a slave in 1807. He was able to run away, but then was imprisoned in North Carolina. And since he was able to write and speak Arabic, nobody understood him, so they branded him as a lunatic. The governor then purchased him and gave him a small house on his estate. And Umar ibn Said wrote an autobiography and maintained a lot of his religious identity. The gentleman on the right is Alexander Russell Webb, and he converted to Islam in 1888 and was the United States consul to the Philippines. The portrait in the middle is probably the most recognizable figure in the world, Muhammad Ali. was by unpopular, somebody who embraced his identity not only as a Black American, but also as a Muslim in the 1960s, along with Malcolm X. And many of them were able to establish and help mosques all across the country. So many people often see Islam as an immigrant religion or a community who's come from, the Middle East or Asia or elsewhere to the United States, but really there's this long-standing historic tradition of Islam in America. So we just wanted to provide that context today to establish, how we view and engage the Muslim community. So we wanted to also provide some background on research that has been done in the last decade on who American Muslims are.
So we have a study that was provided by Dinar Standard and Care. This is a 10-year-old study that actually shares with us some numbers about, how many registered Muslim voters, how many are engaged civically. And as you can see here, about 10 years ago, it showed about 500,000 registered Muslim voters. That number is significantly larger today. Just in California alone, there are over a million American Muslims, so that puts things into context a little bit. The Institution for Social Policy and Understanding tells us about who are American Muslims, and so 73% of Muslim women have a post-high school education. 25% of American Muslims are Black. 24% of American Muslims are white. 18% of American Muslims are Arab. 18% are Asian American. 7% are mixed, and 5% are of Hispanic origins. Muslim Americans that attend mosques tend to be more civically engaged. It's important to note that the early immigrants, American Muslim immigrants, typically gave in a traditional manner of giving to the mosque. In recent years, charity has become more modernized, with institutions forming in the American Muslim community, a lot more nonprofits establishing. And so they are moving away from the tradition of just giving to mosques and rather giving through charitable institutions today. And this is the trend that we're encouraging American Muslims to go in, so that there's more organized and more impactful giving when it comes to their charitable giving. Let's move on to the next slide.
Sure. One of the things that I also wanted to note is through the American Muslim Fund, we're working with American Muslims across the country to really get a better understanding of the different types of causes that they support. So in the last year and a half, we've been able to fund over $550,000 to hospitals, universities, domestic violence shelters, food banks, all across the country, showcasing that the American Muslim community cares about the general American population as well, in addition to the mosques and the schools and civil rights organizations that are representing Muslims here as well. So what we really wanted to highlight was the basic principles of Zakat and who is eligible to receive funding from the Muslim community when they distribute their Zakat. And Zakat is mentioned over 85 times in the Quran, and it's mentioned 30 times with prayer. So when you think of the 5 pillars that Safat had mentioned, the fact that both Zakat and prayer are mentioned together shows the importance of how we should be applying our Zakat on a regular basis. So there's a verse in the Quran that outlines the 8 different types of individuals or causes that can be beneficiary for Zakat funds. Those who are living without a means of livelihood, the destitute, those who cannot meet their basic needs, those who actually are administrators of Zakat, those who may be recent converts to Islam, those who are be able to free individuals from slavery or servitude, to relieve the debt of another individual, and those who are helping others understand Islam, and those who are wayfarers or stranded travelers. So when Muslims talk about distributing their wealth to those in need, it's people who, or organizations who serve the community in these ways. So you may be interested in how one individual calculates their zakat as well. So one of the resources that we shared in the handout is a zakat calculator. So you can actually look at, your assets and your bank balances and your 401ks and all of that to calculate, subtracting any debts that you may have to see how much zakat you have to pay annually. One of the reasons in which we provide the service through the American Muslim Fund is to help streamline a family's charitable giving through a donor-advised fund. And then we're able to easily report back to the family how their charitable giving is making an impact and to which organizations that they support. I will mention that a lot of families like to also give to individuals. So it may be that they're not supporting organizations directly, but they're supporting people in their local community, or even people who their family may know of that are in tough times. So it's hard to actually track the impact outside of organizations because so much of zakat is given to individuals as well. So moving into organizations that work in the space of Muslim philanthropy. We've mentioned the American Muslim Fund, our national grassroots community foundation. We were established in 2016 to streamline Muslim philanthropy by creating donor-advised funds, distributing grants, and building an endowment. The next is Pillars, which is a social investment fund that offers forward-looking Americans the opportunity to build a more just society. And the last is the Center on American Muslim Philanthropy, which is housed at Indiana University, and they have some great academic scholars who seek to strengthen Muslim philanthropy in America by promoting research, best practices, and education. One of the things that would be amazing to track is estimating how much American Muslims donate. The recent study of Giving USA mentioned that Americans give $410 billion. And if Muslims are 1% of the American population, are Muslims contributing 1% or more to that $410 billion? I'd love to see a day in which we're able to research and track that figure to showcase the generosity of the Muslim community as well.
I think it's important also to note and share that, as we mentioned, American Muslims making up the most diverse racial and ethnic group in America right now. And this is according to a Pew Research study back in 2012, that our philanthropic behavior also reflects that diversity. Muslims give to secular causes, such as protecting the environment, to research on cancer, to education. And so they are not just focused on, building their local mosque or poverty. They're also very much engaged in social issues and crossing faith lines and creating cultural pluralism in how they're giving today.
Right. We also wanted to showcase some large Muslim nonprofits in the United States. And these are organizations that have over an annual revenue of $10 million. So Helping Hand for Relief and Development does a lot of international humanitarian work. Zaytuna College is the first liberal arts college in the United States in Berkeley, California. Islamic Relief USA is also another international relief organization. They also help with natural disasters and partner with the American Red Cross. And then the Syrian American Medical Society does a lot to help with the Syrian refugee crisis, and has been active for the last 20 years, but more recently with the war in Syria has seen an uptick in donations as well.
All right, so our next poll here is, are you currently engaging with Muslim donors? And I'm launching the poll right now. So you can select one of the following, either yes, no, I'm not sure, or other. And again, for other, you can specify in the chat. So about 35%, the majority voted, well, not the majority, but 35% voted no, they're not currently engaging Muslim donors. 30% are, though, which is very interesting. So about half, or about an equal amount, sorry. And 24% said they're not sure, and 11% submitted an other response. Some of the things that they said are, we don't aggregate donors by religion, okay? They're just beginning to engage Muslim donors in the case of another participant. We don't segment Muslim donors yet. And somebody else said, I'm launching an interfaith film and music festival in New York City, so I will find out the data soon. That sounds great. Invite us to that film and music festival, please. And then the other response that we got for other is, my community is very diverse, and yes, we get donations from all groups, including Muslims. And then, yeah, and then that's it. Muhi or Safa, any thoughts on the responses?
So it's actually a testament to the fact that American Muslims are engaging across faith lines and cultural lines. I think that if we were to look at the 24% that said I'm not sure, or are not yet tracking that, I think that we'll see that the yeses will outweigh the nos. I think that American Muslims are very much engaged in their local communities and with the local causes, as well as international causes. So it's the numbers are actually very encouraging.
Great, thank you,
Yeah, I'll
Safa.
agree with that as well. In the handout, there's some research from the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding. And a lot of their demographics and a lot of what they showcase is that people who do not know American Muslims often have their perception of Muslims changed once they meet one, or if they know that they're engaging them, right? So we may not know in our personal networks who is of what faith, but once we actually identify that they are, we're able to then know that we are engaging them, or being more inclusive of their contributions as well. So I think that this leads really well into our next slide, which showcases what we should consider before reaching out. And the next few slides are going to go in depth in terms of what you can do in how you reach out, but some things that we wanted you to consider beforehand is, just with any religion, the donor may be agnostic, maybe they grew up Muslim but are no longer Muslim. They may not be as practicing as you would think, or they may not have the same level of religiosity. So some things, maybe they don't practice Zakat, but they're still charitable, right? Or you may want to be, making an assumption by name. There are a lot of people who maybe embraced Islam later in life and they kept their name and didn't have an Arabic name, right? or there's, different cultural backgrounds play into the significance of philanthropy in their community. So these are all things that we should consider. And even as a Muslim nonprofit organization in reaching out to the community, these are also things that we take into consideration before we write an appeal letter. So even from within the Muslim community, we're cognizant of these things, so we figure that they would be good for you to consider as well. Right now, the American Muslim community is very vulnerable. The political climate isn't necessarily the best. So we need a lot of allies in the community, and how you position your organization to engage the Muslim community is going to be very important. And then we want you to also consider that the giving habits are generally higher in the month of Ramadan, which Safa had mentioned. So we tend to definitely give at the end of the year as well, but since Ramadan goes on a lunar calendar, it shifts about 10 days every year. So this year it started in the middle of May and ended in the middle of June. So next year it might be early May to early June. So considering that, you can develop an outreach strategy and how you implement your engagement with the Muslim community.
Well, just adding to the need for allies, when reaching out to the Muslim community, obviously, I think the most obvious way would be to collaborate and engage with local Muslim community centers and mosques and organizations. Like-minded organizations that might share your mission, you'll find that you could be much more effective in collaborative efforts. A lot of times, maybe new first-generation American Muslims might be more apt to trust their local Muslim organization or community center than a new organization coming in, talking to them, or frequent the Muslim organizations and centers so that you are presenting and educating and engaging them in the advocacy work or the mission statements that you're working on.
All right, so we have our next poll question here, and we've already received a couple of responses. So we asked, have you considered recruiting a Muslim board member? 50% of the responses said, now I am, so they're motivated. 33% said, yes, we have Muslim representation on our board, and 17% said other. And in the other, we got, did we get any responses on other? So we haven't gotten any responses on the other chat, but what are your thoughts, Muhir, Safa?
Well, it's wonderful to see that through this conversation that people are interested now in engaging Muslim representation on their boards. I've served with 5 boards now, and it's always just amazing how much skills and expertise that American Muslims are able to bring to the table from all kinds of backgrounds. So I think it's very much a positive step forward for other faith organizations or other non-faith organizations to engage American Muslims and take advantage of the fact that they are resources in your communities.
Yeah, this is definitely exciting, especially for the 50% who said that they are now considering recruiting Muslim board members. So this is a great segue into our checklist for engaging Muslims. And what I want to highlight is this is like a 12-step plan, but try not to jump ahead to, step 5 or 8 or 10 before you do, the first few steps. So what's very critical is, building a strategy for engagement. Ask somebody who may be Muslim or knows the Muslim community well for advice in how to approach them. Because, if you're working in a specific city or part of the country or internationally, the community there is going to be very different. So what I would suggest is, if you don't have a Muslim friend, make one. And it's as simple as, building connections with the local community. So in order to do that, one step that you may want to take is writing a letter to your local mosque on behalf of your organization. Some of the challenges that may arise with this is that not many mosques have professionalized staff. So although they'll get it, they may not be able to respond to you in a timely manner, or you may not hear back from them. But I think a snail mail and also email or phone call are all great ways to try to get in touch with your local mosque. And part of the advice that your Muslim friend or somebody who knows the Muslim community can provide is which of the local mosques in the community you may have more success with in hearing back from. So once you've done that, it's asking to schedule a visit to the local mosque. Although that mosques are open on a daily basis and people come there for the 5 daily prayers, you want to walk into the mosque knowing that there's going to be someone there to receive you. And that's more so just so that you have a catered experience, so that somebody is there to welcome you, somebody is there to engage with you on any questions that you may have. You never know what you're going to get if you just kind of walk into a mosque and then try to meet somebody that way. You can definitely do that, but you'll have more success if you go in with planning it.
Yeah, just important to note that just like any other community, there are, more conservative mosques or more liberal mosques. You've got everything across the spectrum, really, and this is part of why it's valuable to make a Muslim friend, so that you can get a little bit of a pulse on the makeup of the community, your local community, or the community or region that you're trying to reach out to. Some mosques will be like in a college town mosque might be a lot more liberal, a lot more engaged with youth versus a more larger center, or we have Santa Cruz here in California, where it's a smaller community, maybe about 30 families or so, and so their mosque is not open every day. It's actually by code, but only during congregational prayers will you find a large gathering there. So this is why, if you want to be effective, you want to make sure that you have a little bit of a pulse on the nature of that community that you're trying to engage with.
Excellent. So one of the key steps in engaging the Muslim community, and that some of them will be perceptive to, is setting up a presentation at the mosque. This could be a Friday night program where the community comes together once a month, or it could be during the congregational prayers on Friday in the afternoon, and being able to engage with the Muslim community after the congregational prayers. What this can then lead to is recruiting a Muslim board member. Once you've provided that link and face to your organization at the mosque, I think now is an appropriate time to then look into engaging somebody from the Muslim community to join your board. And the Muslim community is so diverse. So depending on some communities have upwards to 30 to 50 to 60 mosques in a metro area. So you really want to make an effort to streamline that approach and or target a specific community to engage with. Another step that might be insightful for you is utilizing resources like the Council on Foundations or the Foundation Center, and so on and so forth, to research Muslims or Islam and see what organizations are funding Muslims and or causes related to Islam, and then reaching out to those organizations as well. One of the key things with the political climate as well is in these trying times, or if there's news of something that takes place where there's a death in the local Muslim community, or there's an issue taking place on civil rights, or so many other issues that can come about, reach out to your local community during trying times. Let them know that you care. Let them know that you support them. Let them know that you're there for outreach, and you want to build those lines of communication with them as well.
Maybe just to put some numbers to it, because I don't think we shared, there's approximately, this is again, maybe over a decade old study, but there are approximately over 1,200 mosques nationwide. There's about a 25% increase in mosques establishing every year. So I just kind of putting that into perspective, as Mahi mentioned, there are some communities where you're going to have 30 mosques within 90-mile radius. So it's just important to note that there's likely a local mosque in your community. It just depends again with the demographic and population of those in the area.
So this will then lead to your opportunity to engage with the Muslim community as well. Once you've established that presence, you can then also attend local Muslim organizations and community banquets. Muslims love to host events, and there's literally a public fundraiser almost every weekend in larger cities. So there will be plenty of opportunities for you to support the Muslim community, but at the same time build a relationship with them as well. One of the great ways in which you can also engage Muslims is by joining your local community's interfaith council. That's where you'll find the most active Muslim participants is in those spaces as well. And a lot of times they'll be well connected to the footprint of Islam in America as well, or in their local community. So they'll be able to help connect you with other people who can help your organization build relationships with the Muslim community. One of the ways in which and strategies that even the American Muslim Fund has worked with the Muslim community across the country is a lot of big cities have regional councils of Muslim organizations. So for instance, there's one called the Northern California Islamic Council. And everything from San Jose up to Sacramento, a lot of mosques or civil rights advocacy organizations have representation on that council. In the state of Michigan, there's one called the Michigan Muslim Community Council. And again, all of the organizations are affiliated with MMCC. And these are just a few examples of how larger communities across the country operate in umbrella organizations or regional councils to network and strategize. So that might be a great way for you to work with one regional council and present to them when they have their monthly meeting. That way you get in front of a larger number of Muslim organizations at once and can strategize that way as well. The last one before we go to questions and before Safa provides comments as well is celebrate with the Muslim community. We have two holidays that are mainly after Ramadan and after the pilgrimage of Hajj. And again, those are throughout the year in the 9th and 11th lunar month. So again, that timeline is going to shift about 10 days every year. But again, this past year, the pilgrimage of Hajj was in like the mid-August timeframe, and the end of Ramadan was in the mid-June timeframe. So, get in touch with your local Muslim community. And I think if you follow these steps, and again, build a strategy with somebody from your local community, you'll have a lot of success in recruiting Muslim board members to support your organization.
Yes. So Again, to put some numbers to that, there's likely over 1,000 non-houses of worship type organizations also across the country that are founded or are run by American Muslims. And so it's important to note that there are Muslim student associations, there are Islamic schools, there are social and civic services organizations, and as Mahi had mentioned, some charitable and relief organizations. So it's one of the key ways to connect with the community is to collaborate with organizations they're familiar with that are carrying out or conducting like missions or a similar charter to yours. You'll get a lot more engagement, I think, from the organizations and their constituents, and probably faster your ability to actually go further and be more effective in the action or campaign that you're trying to carry out versus going just through the mosque. So it's important to, again, note that there are just a variety of different methods and paths that you can take to connect and engage with the American Muslim community.
Thank you so much, Safa and Muhi. We really appreciate all of this great information that you have shared with us today. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. And while we give folks time to submit their questions, I just want to make our participants aware of two special opportunities. First, if you want to catch up with the conversations that we've had through our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion webinar series, we recommend starting with a recorded webinar, Getting Ahead of the Curve with Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity. Carly Hare, who's the National Director of Change Philanthropy, discusses how nonprofit organizations can proactively address the issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity within their organization in a way that generates positive and transformative change. And again, all of that information is available on grantspace.org, which is the website that we shared with you earlier. You can also access our self-paced e-learning course, Diversity and Inclusion, Walking the Talk, for free, again on GrantSpace, and this explores leadership strategies that advance racial equity and inclusion in foundations and their partners. And with that, I would like to return to our question, to our participants and the questions that they have posed. We have one question asking, so a couple of people mentioned during our pollings that that they're not sure if they receive funding from the Muslim community because they don't segment their donors by religion. If a nonprofit doesn't do that, how can they start? What's a good place for them to start? How can they begin segmenting, or what would you recommend as a first step for those organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. What I would recommend is trying to poll your donors. You can survey them, and hopefully you have broad participation. But I think that if you try to do an annual survey of who your donors are, what are they interested in supporting, and have an optional question for their religious identity, so that way you get to know them better. Again, with the idea, I would much rather go with self-identification in the process of determining what religion they are than based on making an assumption. So that way, just for easy purposes, if you had 1,000 donors on your in your database and you had 500 people respond to that survey and 100 of them indicated that they were Muslim, then at that point you can engage those 100 donors with a specific strategy in relation to maybe hosting an iftar party in Ramadan, which is breaking of the fast. So that's a great way to create an individualized strategy and segment your donor base so that you can try to receive more funding based on the segment of religion.
Yeah, I would add to that if you're doing your outreach or your campaign through a specific channel, like if you are tabling at a local Muslim community center or mosque, or if you're advertising an event through a local Muslim organization's newsletter, maybe also gauging through how did you come to support us? How did you hear about us? The source by which they came to know about you, if your directed outreach was done through the Muslim community organizations or mosques.
Yeah, and
Wonderful.
I think speaking to that as well, sorry, just came to me, was when you're collecting names of people at the mosque and they sign up for your email newsletter, just in addition, try to create a subset in your client relationship management tool that indicates that these people were from your outreach at a Muslim community event. That way you have an ongoing list from that point as well.
Thank you both. Those are all great recommendations. Our next question is from one of our participants, Lindsay. She wants to know, do you have any suggestions specific to folks in the grant writing sphere? Meaning, what should those of us writing grants be cognizant and thoughtful of when submitting proposals to Muslim-led organizations?
I think that's great. It depends on what the institution is funding, but really talk to your mission and your engagement and impact. Really, those are the things that funders are primarily going to care about. If your organization provides services to the Muslim community, that may be relevant, but I wouldn't say that in the case that you don't have those statistics or numbers, you should shy away from it. So as with any grant writing, you want to focus on the impact that your organization is making, and I think those principles would stay the same.
Yeah, I second that. I think it's important to focus on your mission and the problems that you're solving for, and how it maybe directly impacts or promotes benefits for that community that you're trying to service. I've also found, and again, it depends on the initiative or the project that you're trying to work on, but collaborating, a lot of grants are awarded to those that collaborate with other organizations. I think partnering with a Muslim organization and showing that there's going to be a collaborative effort, and that this is a mobilized effort, tends to offer more success in people working together rather than working individually on a cause.
So in many cases, they kind of follow the same rules that just any other foundation in the philanthropy world would look for, correct? Is what I'm hearing.
Definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Wonderful. There's a follow-up question to the first one that was posed. This one is more specific about surveys. So just folks wanting to know if you could provide an example of a useful survey structure, like, what kind of questions would you ask donors when trying to find out, if, what religion that they pertain to, or, how they identify. And then also, what platforms would you recommend for donor surveys? Are we talking about SurveyMonkey, Qualtrics? Are there any other platforms that you think are particularly good for donor-specific surveys?
That's a great question. What I would say is, utilize the research that comes out from Giving USA. They have a great breakdown showcasing that majority of people who give to religious institutions or because of their religion first and foremost. And then I think it's education and then social services and others following that. But if you focus on the reason in terms of why you're asking that question, because the research validates that, I think it's more appropriate to ask that question. And people would be more engaged with answering that question as well. In terms of different platforms to utilize, I think my experience has only been with SurveyMonkey, so I can only speak to that. And I've been happy with the results in terms of it being able to analyze the results. But something that you may want to consider is something that streamlines easily into your client relationship management tool and database. So if there's one platform that does that a lot more seamlessly, that may be easier for you in the long run so that you have that data directly input into your database and the donor's profile.
Yeah, this is a great question, but it's a really deep question also, because there's a lot that goes into surveys. I think that it's always really important to be careful how you survey. It's important to find sources and experts in research and devising surveys so that you're asking the right questions and not taking yourself down a tunnel that doesn't really support what you're trying to achieve. So I think for one, and in the nonprofit space, there are always many people that want to give altruistically with their time. So I'd reach out to universities and find, students or fellows that are in survey studies that would be open to helping you create the guidelines for a survey. If you, depending again on the size of the project or the initiative that you're trying to work on. But in terms of tools, there's really a lot of tools out there. I think that the key is first having the right questions and devising the right framework for what it is that you're trying to answer for. And then the tools really, as Mahi mentioned, MailChimp is available. You can even use Google Forms to create a survey, and they have analysis tools there too. But it's always best to make sure that it's integratable with your donor or constituent relationship management tools. And most of those tools typically offer you forms that allow you to also run surveys and polls. Also, not forgetting that today with social networking, there's a lot of social networking platforms that allow you to poll if you're trying to do a broader reach to, a broader demographic. But again, it's about understanding your objective and the quality of the data that you're collecting rather than just quantity.
Thank you so much, Safa. The next question is from Brandon, and he wants to know, a lot of reports have found that Muslim nonprofits, but especially mosque community boards, lack core nonprofit management skills, and this also prevents them from efficiently seeking funding. Can you offer practical advice for widespread cultural change towards professionalization in Muslim nonprofits? Muhi or Safa, any thoughts on that?
I love that question. Yes, thank you. This is a space that the American Muslim organizations are trying and very much to grow in right now and are focusing in. And institutional development is key. Realizing that the American Muslim community is a fairly young community still in establishing itself and its roots. It's grown a lot in the last 3 decades. It's shown its growth through the number of organizations, nonprofit organizations that are popping up day in and day out. But it's not a problem that American Muslim nonprofits are only dealing with. A lot of organizations in the nonprofit sector deal with this, and it's primarily because of limited resources. It could be limited funding or limited human resources, people giving into the cause. And so what tends to happen with a lot of the American Muslim organizations is that they're so focused on trying to mobilize the community in support that they sometimes are not able to focus in their infrastructure. And developing that institutional development. And so this is why we founded American Muslim Fund. This is why organizations like Muslim Advocates or CARE are out there trying to help smaller nonprofits in creating governance compliance and creating institutional infrastructures that are allowing them to comply with requirements and get that capacity building out of the way. So It's about establishing best practices. The organizations that Muhi mentioned early on that are in this, creating this philanthropic ecosystem for American Muslims, that's their focus. Its number one focus is about getting nonprofits to form strong infrastructures and institutional development so they're here for the next generations. I hope that answers your question, unless there's like a specific space in institutional development that you're referring to.
Again, I think his question was a bit more general, and I think you've answered it. Thank you very much. So we just got a message from him saying "thank you!" exclamation mark. Another question that also came up is in terms of giving circles. So giving circles is something that obviously has become very popular within the world of traditional philanthropy, and other types of donors have also kind of adopted that. The Latino community, is an example of folks that have adopted the giving circles and adapted it to their own kind of culture as well. Is there anything like that in the Muslim community that you think has been successful in engaging Muslim donors?
Yeah, that's wonderful. And one of the organizations that I think does a great job of it is within the Jewish community, there's one called Amplifier, and it's an online resource center for establishing best practices of giving circles. And one of the things that the American Muslim Fund sets out to do is that as well. We want to engage local communities and help them establish giving circles so that they can be more effective in their philanthropy. We have a few that have started, but again, like our organic growth over the last year and a half has been working primarily with 28 donor advised funds across the country, and of those there are a handful of giving circles that we operate. The Pillars Fund, which I also mentioned, that are in this space, they've been a very effective giving circle over the last 7 or 8 years, and they've done a great job of it as well. The main thing is that we want to establish this best practice within the Muslim community, and are looking forward to taking best practices from other communities, like you mentioned, the Latino community and other religious communities who have a very good track record of giving circles, and adopt that for the Muslim community as well.
Wonderful. And I believe that Elizabeth is about to has already shared a link in the chat box, kind of showcasing the project that Muhi just mentioned. So check your chat boxes for more information. Thank you so much, Muhi. The next question that we have is from Stephanie. And Stephanie asks, if we are not a Muslim organization, is it appropriate to make it clear that you are intentionally targeting Muslim donors during Islamic holidays? And I also had kind of a follow-up question to that, and that is, how open is the Muslim community for someone who's not Muslim, just from a very different culture, to coming in and taking part in some of these celebrations? Is that something that is well received, or do you recommend that we do go with a Muslim friend to kind of introduce us when we get started?
That's a great question, Stephanie. Thanks for asking that. I think it all depends on the intentionality of what you're trying to do. I think being upfront and candid is great, but at the same time, talk about your personal interest in learning more about the religion, and also provide the fact that you work with a nonprofit organization and want to be more cognizant of the religion and maybe the mosque's particular cultural identity as well, so that you can become a stronger nonprofit organization. And I think that they would be receptive to that engagement as well. And so that will chime in too.
Yeah, I think as we mentioned, American Muslims are diverse racially and ethnically, and it really depends. It's important to go into it with being fully informed about the nature of that community. I think maybe the difference with maybe some other faith groups, and maybe not. There are all kinds of, the beauty of America is a melting pot of many religions, but it really depends on the community that you're entering. I wouldn't want to generalize. I think I would say that most American Muslim institutions are more than happy to be welcomed and engaged into causes across the mainstream. They want to have the ability to contribute as much as they can. Studies have over and over again shown that American Muslims are happy to contribute across the spectrum of different causes and issues that affect us all as a society, not just their local community. So I think that, as Mahi mentioned, it's important to go in with an intention of being candid and mutual learning and understanding. I think to answer the question, my advice would be to go in with the intention of wanting to engage them and to work together for a greater good.
That's a great way of putting it, Safa. Thank you. We have another question that is asking about board member engagement. Are there strategies or practices that you recommend that we implement into our board recruitment process to help recruit a Muslim board member?
Well, this is a challenge, I think, across the board for any community in engaging board members. It's again about just getting involved in the community and understanding where the interests are. As Muslim Americans are in a variety of different vocations, and so we've had our own challenges of recruiting board members, but we've also found that it's never good to pigeonhole yourself into a box and thinking outside of the box. Again, it's about being informed and educated about that community that you're trying to engage, understanding the skill sets. An exercise that we usually go through is finding the gap, looking at the makeup of your board, making sure that it's in terms of vocation, the skill sets do we have a good mix, and are we meeting all the needs of the institution in terms of skill sets and knowledge and expertise. Location, being able to have a regionally diverse board that's not all in one location, but rather your members are really your ambassadors to the community, and so you want to make sure that you're reaching broadly and not just in one focused area. Who they know, the network, how engaged and involved have they been in the past, and with altruistic giving and engagement. Also looking at the younger generation and not just focusing on people that have been there and have 10 years of experience with nonprofits or more, but rather college students and college graduates, and they have so much to give and to contribute to the nonprofit space and the causes that affect our community. So doing an exercise first of understanding where your gaps are and meeting that. And I also just mentioning, and again, this is a space that thankfully in the last decade or more now, American Muslim institutions are improving in, is also gender diversity, making sure that there are more women engaged in boards and leadership roles. So I think a key to having a healthy board is to ensure that you're covering all your bases and making sure that it's you're not leaving any gap unfilled in terms of skills, location, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, and so forth.
Thank you so much, Safa. And a follow-up question to that is, are there any organizations in the Muslim community that focus on placing Muslim professionals into boards?
Maybe not their strategic focus, but one that I've had success with in recruiting from is an organization called Muslim Urban Professionals. It goes by the nickname of Muppies, M-U-P-P-I-E-S. And it's a membership professional-based organization where people from all different backgrounds and talents and skill sets come together for professional networking. And I've had some success in recruiting board members for many organizations in the past from there as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And Elizabeth has already shared the link in the chat box. So to our participants, you can access the information there. The next question is about Millennial Muslims and how their giving practices either differ or are similar to that of their parents. Are there any changes in the way that Millennial Muslims are becoming engaged in the nonprofit sector and in philanthropy? Muhir, Safa?
That's a fantastic question, and I would actually like to know the answer to that myself. I think that there's an organization called, that we mentioned as well, the Center for American Muslim Philanthropy, and they do a lot of research on the Muslim community and philanthropy in general. So I think that would be a great opportunity for them to work with Indiana University on that. Indiana University, as many of you know, has a fantastic fundraising school, and a lot of their graduate students and undergraduate students going into philanthropy as a career do a lot of research. So I would pose the question to them, as they're probably better apt to answer it. But just in my own experience, I've noticed that giving circles have been generally more prominent with Millennial Muslims over the last 5 years or so. I've noticed like 3 or 4 across the country. The struggle is, they'll be around for 2 to 3 years, but then lack the infrastructure to continue going forward. So that's really where American Muslim Fund sees itself providing more infrastructure and best practices to keep these giving circles moving forward. So, definitely Millennial Muslims are giving, and once they are, young professionals themselves, they're giving their Zakat, and they're giving to causes that may not be the same patterns as their parents or earlier generations, but they're giving to local causes, they're giving to places where they see an impact, they're giving to places where they can be more engaged with their philanthropy as well.
Wonderful, thank you. Safa, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. I think that, as we mentioned earlier, that early American Muslim immigrants would tend to give in a traditional way of just their zakat and almsgiving would typically go to the mosque. A testament to the change in the newer in today's generations is that a lot of Muslim nonprofits are able to establish and mobilize in different ways than through the local mosque. And it shows that they are giving differently. They're not giving in the traditional means of, sending your annual zakah or almsgiving to the masjid or the mosque, but rather through civic and social causes that are affecting them directly, and through helping smaller institutions get off the ground. And so I think today's times and the social issues and the political issues that are affecting American Muslims and still a post 9/11 America, that this millennial generation sees the need to impact in other spaces than just your local mosque or community center.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The next question comes from Brandon, and he wants to know if you could comment on crowdfunding as a style and platform for philanthropy in the Muslim community. For example, Launch Good. Is this a common practice?
That's a fantastic question, Brandon, and I love that you already knew what LaunchGood was. So it's actually a personal friend of mine from Michigan, is one of the co-founders of launchgood.com. And LaunchGood is exactly that, a faith-based crowdfunding platform. I've seen in recent years maybe 3 or 4 other platforms that have shown an uptick in Muslim crowdfunding. Another one is called Feeling Blessed. And as an organization, you can sign up on their website. And that's more so an app-based giving platform. And one that just recently launched as well is called Zakatify. So I would recommend looking into all of those. And there's definitely a trend moving forward of, you know, Muslim organizations participating in Giving Tuesday, and definitely promoting Facebook fundraising and other social platforms. So the community overall is definitely aligning with best practices within the fundraising community to see the most impact in their fundraising efforts.
Well, Muhi and Safa, I want to thank you so much for your time and for this wonderful presentation and the information that you shared with us today. I also want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. On behalf of Foundation Center and our presenters, thank you so much for joining us today. If you like this webinar, we hope that you will join us again soon, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.